I was born with blocked ovaries, and my husband suggested we try in vitro fertilization. I accidentally discovered that my husband was going to have his eggs replaced with those of his childhood sweetheart, Nora. I pretended not to know and arranged for someone to replace the eggs back. She even switched her husband's sperm with that of her childhood sweetheart, Ethan, thinking she didn't need the genes of a phoenix man, a man from a poor background who achieved success. 24 years later, I handed over 10% of the company's shares to my son, who had just graduated. Nora, my childhood sweetheart whom my husband had left behind, came home and looked at me triumphantly. "The child you raised with such care is mine." "Adrian, my precious son." As soon as my son and I got home, we heard Nora crying and wailing. Relatives I don't usually associate with have all arrived one after another, their eyes scanning between Nora and me. I sneered inwardly. I knew Nora had specifically invited these people. I glanced coldly at Victor, who was standing next to Nora. "What's the big deal today? Why have so many people come?" Adrian glanced coldly at the feigning weakness of Nora, then turned his icy gaze to Victor. Under my tutelage, he already knew his father had a mistress, but he never expected him to bring her home. Before Victor could speak, Nora ran to her son with tears streaming down her face. "Adrian, Mom has finally seen you. Let Mom take a good look at you." Adrian quickly stepped back, his tone icy. "My mother's name is Serena, don't go around claiming her as your son." The way he looked at Nora was as if he were looking at a mentally ill person. I smiled slightly with satisfaction. "He truly is my son." Nora stumbled and fell to the ground. Victor hugged him tightly, his heart aching. "Adrian, you're so inconsiderate. She's your..." Slap. I raised my hand and slapped them both across the face. "A mistress who can't stand the light of day dares to spout nonsense here." My tone was icy, my eyes filled with disgust and loathing for Nora. Victor jumped to his feet, his usual gentle demeanor gone, and raised his hand to hit me. Adrian grabbed his wrist, looking at him with disdain. "What right do you have to hit my mother?" Seeing Victor struggle, Adrian tightened his grip and pushed him hard, sending Victor slamming heavily onto Nora. Victor's eyes widened, and he raised his foot to kick Adrian, but Nora stopped him. "Victor, this is our son, don't hurt him." Victor, barely containing his anger, his chest heaving, glared fiercely at Adrian. "If your own mother hadn't stopped me, I would have given you a good beating. How dare you hit me right after graduating from college? Serena must have corrupted you." His eyes were full of resentment as he looked at me, wishing he could devour me alive. Adrian stood in front of me. "Only incompetent men blame women. If you're so capable, just hit me." My son faced Victor without fear, his aura just like mine. "All right, stop fooling around." My uncle Ernest, who had just returned from the nursing home, gave a stern reprimand. As the eldest member of the family, everyone turned to look at him the moment he spoke. He glanced at Nora and Victor, his eyes filled with scrutiny. "You two made such a big fuss calling us here today. What exactly is it about?" Victor and Nora exchanged a glance, and Victor cleared his throat. "Today I have some very important news to announce." He looked at me and my son as he spoke, took a deep breath, and deliberately pretended to hesitate. I watched his performance with a cold expression, my heart filled with disdain. "Adrian is not Serena's son." These words were like a boulder thrown into a calm lake. The crowd gasped in shock. Adrian flinched, his eyes filled with disbelief as he looked at me. I gently patted his shoulder, signaling him not to panic. The surrounding relatives were in an uproar, their expressions revealing gossip and greed. A slight glint flashed in Victor's eyes, quickly replaced by sadness. "When we were doing the IVF, the doctor said that Serena's eggs were likely to fail. To avoid upsetting her, I contacted Nora and had the eggs switched." I listened to his words with a cold laugh to myself. This phoenix-like man wanted to rebel against the established order, yet he pretended to be doing it for my own good. Victor glanced at me out of the corner of his eye, expecting me to go crazy. But I remained completely calm, leisurely sipping my tea. He cleared his throat and continued, "I've called everyone here today to explain something." He looked at Nora, Adrian's biological mother is not Serena, but Nora. The relatives looked shocked, and then began to murmur among themselves. I didn't know there was such a thing, but there's nothing we can do about it, since Serena's eggs can't be used. Since Adrian is not Serena but her child, he must acknowledge his biological mother. Yes, what use is a hen that can't lay eggs? If you ask me, I think the position of Mrs. Wentworth-Sterling Consortium should be relinquished. The Wentworth-Sterling Consortium should not be in the hands of a woman. My gaze swept over the people who were speaking. Victor knew how to pick people. They were all parasites who had been purged from the company. They had long been dissatisfied with me and were hoping that I, Nora, would compete with me and kick me out of the company completely. That way, they could use the opportunity to return and make even more money. Adrian's face grew increasingly grim as he looked at his relative, whose face clearly screamed, "Kick Serena out of the company." I looked at Victor with a mocking expression. Adrian is the child I carried for 10 months and gave birth to. He is my child, and I will never recognize anyone else as his mother. My voice was firm and unwavering. Nora's tears instantly streamed down her face, her expression filled with the grief of having her child taken away from her. "Sister, Adrian is my child, stop deceiving yourself. I am his mother. I'm telling the truth, Adrian is indeed my biological son." Nora and Victor really thought I knew nothing. 25 years ago, before my wedding, I confessed that I had blocked ovaries and couldn't conceive naturally. Victor suggested IVF. I agreed, only to catch him with Nora. That's when I found out they'd been together for a long time. No wonder he never got angry when I made excuses to avoid letting him touch me. There was even joy in his eyes. It turned out he'd always had a beautiful woman in his arms, and he was determined to remain chaste for Nora. The two of them conspired to switch my egg with Nora's. I took precautions beforehand. After they bribed the nurse to make the switch, I had the doctor switch back the other egg I'd prepared beforehand. I even had the doctor change the genetic father of my son, replacing Victor's sperm with my childhood friend Ethan's. Victor and I were both eagerly anticipating a successful embryonic development, and Victor was overjoyed that day. He thought it was his and Nora's child, and he had been incredibly attentive to me during my pregnancy. He was even more afraid than I was of miscarrying. After the baby was born, he excitedly told his parents in Jiangqing the news. For 24 years, I watched him treat Adrian with genuine affection, and I would laugh out loud in my dreams. He thought he had wronged me, but little did he know that he had been a father to someone else's child for 24 years. "Although Adrian was born from you, the egg wasn't yours at all." Victor couldn't help but speak up, interrupting my recollection. He said sarcastically, "Adrian's biological mother is Nora. Are you going to fight her for the child?" I looked at Victor with disdain and said in an icy tone, "I think you've lost your mind and are talking nonsense." Victor, his face flushed with anger after being scolded, tried to suppress his rage and defend himself to me. "We can do a paternity test. Adrian and you are definitely not mother and son. I want a divorce too. You forced me to marry you back then by using the money for my surgery. I've been treated like a slave for you all these years. I've had enough." When he brought up divorce, he kept glancing at Nora out of the corner of his eye. He'd been planning to divorce me ever since he cheated on me, intending to ruin me with Nora. But I don't approve of him being a slave to me. He was a penniless college graduate who married into my family, and his net worth instantly doubled, allowing him to live a life of extravagance. Moreover, he was the one who pursued me, and he begged me to pay for his father's surgery. I gave him status and money, yet he felt I humiliated him. It's truly disgusting. I knew his plan, to divorce me, marry Nora, and use his son Adrian to take control of the Wentworth-Sterling Consortium. But he miscalculated. My expression remained calm, and my tone was indifferent. "Fine, let's get a divorce. But forget about the paternity test. I'm certain Adrian is my biological son." Adrian stood firmly by my side. "Mom, I believe you. I can tell from my appearance that I'm your son." Victor and Nora's faces paled. Victor hurriedly reached out to pull Adrian, saying, "Son, don't you even believe your father? Adrian sidestepped his hand, stood behind me, and his attitude was obvious. Brother. Just then, a girl walked in from the doorway. She rushed to Adrian's side, her face beaming with joy. Brother, I'm Rena. Everyone present was stunned. How did they suddenly have a little sister? Everyone's eyes darted between Victor and me, clearly watching with amusement. But I wasn't surprised at all. Rena is the daughter of Victor and Nora. When Adrian was 3 years old, Victor and Nora secretly had another child. Bang! My dad, who had been silent until now, slammed his hand on the table. Victor! What on earth is going on? My dad had already figured out the affair between Victor and Nora. Victor's infidelity was shameful enough, but the fact that they had a child together was shocking. My dad clutched his chest in anger. Explain yourself. The living room fell silent. Rena's eyes instantly reddened as she looked at Adrian. I've always known you're my brother. Her voice choked with sobs, and she would glance at me every now and then, her eyes filled with fear, as if she were afraid I would devour her. Mom often talks about you. She says you're very handsome and do exceptionally well in your studies. Nora choked up, her eyes brimming with tears as she looked at Adrian. Adrian, I've missed you so much all these years, I want to see you every single moment. Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, as if she were the one who had been deceived. Rena misses you a lot too, and I often bring her to school to see you. Rena nodded hurriedly. Brother, I worked so hard to get into the same university as you. She opened her phone. It was full of photos of Adrian, including one of him giving a speech in the auditorium, and another of him taking graduation photos with his roommates. His life from freshman to senior year had been documented with pictures. Adrian took a step back in disgust. Rena taking pictures of him, what's the difference between her and a pervert? She'd been secretly monitoring him all along. Victor wasn't idle either, and slowly walked towards my father. Dad, I have no choice. Serena is your only daughter, that's true, but she can't have children. Our Wentworth-Sterling consortium needs someone to inherit it. I'm doing this so that the Wentworth-Sterling consortium can have a successor. I knew exactly what he was thinking. My father's greatest wish was to have a grandson who could inherit the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. After Adrian was born, my father was so happy that he gave Victor 3% of the shares and promoted him to general manager. Over the years, my father has devoted almost all his resources to raising Adrian. As long as the old man still acknowledges Adrian as his grandson, and with Adrian, the future heir of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium, around, my father won't kick him out even if his son-in-law Victor cheats on him. That's why he brought Nora home without any hesitation. He not only wanted to bring Nora into the house, but he even wanted to bring his illegitimate daughter back, betting that my dad wouldn't be willing to part with his excellent grandson, Adrian. My dad hesitated at this point, looking at Adrian and then at me, unable to speak after much deliberation. I chuckled, breaking the silence. Since you're doing this to leave an heir for the Wentworth-Sterling consortium, what's the deal with this daughter? Was she an extra? This is the first time I've seen someone make infidelity sound so elegant. In the end, it all comes down to not being able to control your lower body. I turned my head to look at Adrian, my eyes carrying a deep meaning, and he immediately understood. Even though Adrian isn't my biological son, I still love him. He is my only son, Serena. I will give him all my money, real estate, including a 25% stake in the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. A smile played on my lips as I looked at Adrian, my eyes filled with love and expectation. Adrian, Mom is giving you everything, are you coming with me? Or with your father who married into your family and your mother who randomly adopted a son? Adrian immediately realized what was going on and put his arm around my shoulder. Mom, of course I'll stay with you. They both have other children, and I definitely won't get a single penny. As expected of my carefully trained son, he not only pointed out their affair but also subtly revealed his true intentions. When Victor and Nora heard that I had given all my assets to Adrian, they exchanged a glance, their smiles barely concealed, brimming with greed and smugness. Victor had long coveted my wealth, I had plenty of money. Not to mention the 25% stake I held, the annual income would be more than enough to last several lifetimes. The lust in their eyes was undisguised, and the two leaned closer to whisper among themselves. When my grandfather passed away, he gave all his shares to Serena to help her secure her position as president. Her dad only had 10% in his hands, and he gave you 3% back then. Nora said, giving me a sharp glare out of the corner of her eye. She lowered her voice. Once Serena gives the shares to Adrian, and Adrian inherits the old man's shares, he'll have 35% of the shares. That way, I'll be the largest shareholder, and she'll lose everything and get out of Wentworth Sterling Consortium. Victor nodded repeatedly, thinking Nora was absolutely right. Victor looked at Adrian with a kind expression. Adrian, Rena is a girl, she'll get married someday, and Dad won't leave the inheritance to her. He looked at Nora, but you have to do a paternity test with Nora. If it's confirmed that she's your mother, you have to acknowledge her and leave Serena. Adrian frowned, and I nodded slightly to signal his agreement. Okay, but you have to transfer all the assets to my name first. He agreed, but also made a condition. I was overjoyed. My son really knew what I was thinking. Money only truly belongs to you when you have it in your hands. The relatives who had been watching the spectacle instantly became excited. How could they not have thought of something that Victor and Nora, those two idiots, had come up with? Each of them seemed to see a bright future. Victor is just a figurehead in the company, he has no business acumen. Nora has never managed a company either. If the Wentworth Sterling Consortium falls into their hands, wouldn't it just be easy for those old foxes to manipulate it? Adrian is right, I'll contact a lawyer right now. My father looked at me with a conflicted expression. Although he favored sons over daughters and regretted not having a son to inherit the family business, he also knew that with the economic turmoil of recent years, the Wentworth Sterling Consortium would have gone bankrupt long ago if it weren't for me. He hesitated before asking, Serena, are you really going to transfer the property? I nodded. Dad, don't worry. My father sighed and slowly closed his mouth. After some effort from our relatives, Victor and I transferred our assets to Adrian's name. Only $30,000 was left for living expenses. As Adrian signed his name, Victor and Nora's eyes lit up. They could practically see him swaggering around the Wentworth Sterling Consortium. I smiled, looking at my son who had become the largest shareholder. Only one person was missing. I needed to quickly seize Nora's assets as well. Nora, don't you miss Adrian every year and love him very much? I saw Nora's expression change suddenly, pretended not to see it and continued, I've spent tens of millions raising your son all these years. I don't want you to pay me back. I love Adrian the most. Just give the money to Adrian. Adrian continued, Nora, you keep saying you love me. Then you'll give me the same security as Dad, right? My dad raised you all these years, he must have secretly given you millions, right? I don't think you'd mind giving it to your own son, would you? Or is it like Mom said, that you came back not to acknowledge me, but for the Wentworth Sterling Consortium? Nora's face stiffened, and she hesitated. Taking out the money hurt her heart, but not giving it would arouse Adrian's suspicion. Thinking about the more she would receive in the future, she gritted her teeth and handed Adrian a card. Adrian, Mom's money is your money. Why wouldn't I want to give it to you? Adrian immediately looked at the lawyer. Please have Attorney Lee draft the contract. Nora clenched her fists tightly, her knuckles turning white from the force. Her heart was breaking, but she could only feign happiness, her distorted face was a sight to behold. Victor personally contacted the doctor to conduct the paternity test, carefully overseeing every step, afraid I might rig it. After the doctor took blood samples from me, Adrian, and Nora, I slightly raised my head and looked at Victor, and him. Let's do the test together. Victor scoffed, I'm Adrian's biological father, there's no need for a test. I raised an eyebrow, what? Are you scared? Adrian didn't know why I made this request, but he went along with my words to persuade Victor. Adrian was Victor's cash cow, so he readily agreed. Leaving the hospital, Rena smiled and walked towards Adrian, brother. She tried to hug Adrian, but he dodged her, his tone cold, stay away from me. Rena was yelled at, and her eyes instantly reddened, welling up with tears of grievance. Just like Nora, that scheming woman. Nora quickly coaxed, Adrian, your siblings, you should be nicer to your sister. Adrian patted the hem of his clothes that Nora had touched, as if it were stained with something dirty. We haven't even defined our relationship yet, she's a stranger. I remained calm and said indifferently, Victor, let's get a divorce now. From now on, you have nothing to do with the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. Nora was surprised that I loved Victor so much that I was so quick to agree to a divorce. Victor also looked surprised, a hint of disdain flashing in his eyes. I couldn't be happier to divorce you. I know what he's thinking. He doesn't have me anymore, but he still has Nora and Adrian. Now that I no longer have shares in the Wentworth-Sterling consortium, I'm no longer of any use to him. Since neither of us has any assets, and neither of us is trying to take advantage of the other, we went straight to getting a divorce. Nora was initially happy, but seeing Adrian calling me mom repeatedly made her resentful. While Adrian was out shopping, she rushed up to me and boasted, Serena, let me tell you a secret, Victor has never loved you, he only loves me. On your wedding day, he said his mother was sick, but actually he went to see me. And Dad, he dotes on me the most, we've often eaten together over the years. Rena, no longer the weakling she once was, glared at me and declared, my brother owns all the shares in the Wentworth-Sterling consortium now, he's the future president of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. Once the psychiatric evaluation results are out, you can expect to be kicked out. I had absolutely no interest in the performance of these two clowns. I didn't even bother to glance at them and turned to leave. Nora, seeing my indifference, glared at me darkly. You took control of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium as the sole heir, now it's time to hand it over to Victor and me. I stared into her eyes, a cold smile playing on my lips, you've handed him over. Adrian really is just a tool for you. Nora linked arms with Victor, a victorious smile spreading across her face. You're only just realizing this? Too late. The shares are all in Adrian's name now. Once the paternity test results come out, Victor and I will be the heads of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. I suppressed my smile, I'll wait and see if you have the ability to take control of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. They planned it all perfectly. They thought they had me completely outmaneuvered. Little did they know that I was the one truly in control, simply watching their farcical performance. After the share transfer agreement was signed, Adrian became the largest shareholder, and I threw him a celebration banquet. Halfway through the banquet, I heard a commotion at the door, and when I turned around, I saw Rena. Her eyes were full of arrogance and haughtiness as she shouted, Adrian is my brother, I am the daughter of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium, let me in right now. The staff hesitated, not daring to stop her. I stepped forward and shouted sternly, throw her out. The bodyguards saw me and immediately grabbed Rena. Rena struggled violently, yelling, my brother is the president of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. You lowly creatures, let me go. She glared at me fiercely, Serena, you're not my brother's biological mother at all. You've lost all your shares, what right do you have to attend this banquet and act so arrogantly, she yelled, scratching at the security guard with her sharp nails. Just as I was about to explode, Adrian came out from inside, who's causing trouble here? Rena burst into tears instantly, brother, save me. Her expression changed faster than turning the pages of a book. She pointed at me with a wronged look and said in a trembling voice, this bitch won't let me in. Adrian's expression grew increasingly grim, shut up. If you dare insult my mother, I'll kill you. You're not on the invitation list, you have no right to go in. Also, I'm not your brother, don't go around claiming relatives. Adrian. How can you disown your sister? Nora rushed over in a formal dress. While we're at the banquet, you should be introducing us to others. Let us in now. Adrian scoffed, guards, throw these two lunatics out. Upon seeing this, Nora immediately cried out, I am Adrian's biological mother, Wentworth-Sterling consortium is mine, let me go. Seeing guests looking this way, my gaze hardened. The scandals of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium couldn't be exposed. I snapped, throw this shrew out. The bodyguards immediately stepped forward and dragged the two of them outside. Nora threatened, "Serena, you bitch. When the test results come out tomorrow, I'll make you kneel down and kowtow to me." I watched her hysterical roar and smiled mockingly. I'm looking forward to the results too. Upon receiving the test results, Nora woke everyone up early at the villa. Dressed flamboyantly like a peacock, she made no attempt to hide it from me, exchanging flirtatious glances with Victor. I glanced at her, hoping she'd still be smiling so happily after the results. Besides her father, Nora had also invited relatives to the hospital to witness the outcome. I saw through her little scheme. She wanted more people to laugh at me. Fine, let her be. Let's see who gets laughed at first. Before confirming the results, I smiled and looked at Victor. You chose this hospital and doctor yourself, so you have no objections to the results, right? Victor said coldly, "Of course I have no objection." I suppressed a laugh. It was good that he was so certain. Before the doctor came over, Nora smiled and took Victor's hand. "Once the results come out, the four of us will be able to live happily together." After saying that, she glanced at me triumphantly, her eyes full of smugness and provocation. I turned to look at Adrian. Adrian was looking down at his documents, not even glancing at Nora. Nora's act was in vain, but she quickly put on a smiling face. "Adrian, Mom is the best cook. Tell Mom what you like to eat." She also took out an expensive watch from her bag. "This is a gift for your family reunion." Adrian didn't even glance at it, continuing to type on his notebook. Nora's hand froze. Victor stepped forward. "Adrian, your mother has been looking for a long time, hurry up and accept it." Adrian looked coldly at Victor. "Why should I accept it? My mother is Serena, not her. I can tell who is truly good to me, who truly loves and cares for me." My eyes welled up with tears. My son would always protect me. Just then, the doctor came over with the test results. Victor, Nora, and Rena instantly straightened their backs, staring intently at the report. It was as if they wanted to see through that piece of paper, that wealth and glory were right before their eyes. Nora said smugly in my ear, "You got in the way of Victor and me back then, now it's your turn to be kicked out." I suppressed the urge to burst out laughing. The doctor opened the file, and Nora, no longer able to boast, stared intently at the report. In their eyes, it was their passport to the pinnacle of power. Victor couldn't suppress the urge to smile. He seemed ready to jump up and cheer at any moment. Nora's tears streamed down her face. "Adrian, soon you'll know that I'm your mother." And the dumbest one, Rena, actually made a request to Adrian. "Brother, I'm your own sister. Wentworth Sterling Consortium has an entertainment company. You have to make me a big star. Once I become famous, I'll be the spokesperson for Wentworth Sterling Consortium, and Wentworth Sterling Consortium can go even higher." She had this Adrian should be like this look on her face. I watched their stupid expressions with indifference. I hoped they'd still be laughing after the results were in. The doctor opened the results, based on the comparative analysis, Nora and Adrian. He looked up at Nora, who, seeing his pause, urged impatiently, "Announce it quickly." The others at the Wentworth Sterling Consortium were also eagerly awaiting the results, hoping to get a share of the profits from Nora later. The two are not related. Victor jumped to his feet, snatching the paternity test report from the doctor's hand. "This is definitely wrong. Nora and Adrian are mother and son." Nora's legs went weak, almost causing her to fall. She looked at Victor. "Victor, you didn't switch them." Rena snatched the paternity test results from me and Adrian. "This." The doctor began. "Adrian and Miss Serena are mother and son." Victor froze. "Impossible." Seeing the incomprehension in my father's and Adrian's eyes, I stood up and looked at everyone. "I caught you planning to swap eggs back then, and I arranged to have the eggs swapped back." I looked at Victor's increasingly pale face, and my mood improved even more. The Wentworth Sterling Consortium doesn't need the inferior genes of that scumbag, so I replaced them with my childhood friend Ethan's sperm. This news exploded like a bolt from the blue for everyone. My dad looked up at me abruptly, his face filled with disbelief. I took the last report from the doctor and threw it at Victor's pale face. "Adrian isn't your child." Serena. Victor rushed at me, furious, but Adrian kicked him away. He rolled on the ground, clutching his stomach, yelling, "You bastard, how dare you hit me?" I scoffed, "Victor, have you forgotten that you married into the Wentworth-Sterling consortium? My children, regardless of who the father is, are rightfully Wentworth-Sterling consortium children." Nora suddenly rushed in front of my dad. "Grandpa, Adrian is just a wild child. Who knows where his real father is from? His bloodline is unclear. What if he ruins the Wentworth-Sterling consortium? He can't inherit the Wentworth-Sterling consortium." My dad recovered from his shock. But he didn't even look at Nora and Rena. His gaze towards me was full of complexity. "Serena, are you telling the truth?" I nodded slightly. "It's true." Nora grasped my father's hand. "Old man, Serena giving birth to a child of unknown origin is a disgrace to the Wentworth-Sterling consortium." Victor chimed in. "Dad, who knows, that man might even try to take the Wentworth-Sterling consortium away." My dad shoved them away. "Shut up. Do you even know who Serena's talking about?" Nora cried out, "A nobody, who cares who he is?" This time, her father didn't try to appease her. "Serena's childhood sweetheart is Ethan, the eldest son of Thornwood Capital Holdings." What? Thornwood Capital Holdings is a top-tier luxury company. If Wentworth-Sterling Consortium can establish a relationship with Thornwood Capital Holdings, it will surely reach a new level. "Serena." A deep voice rang out. Bodyguards escorted an elderly man with a serious expression and a powerful aura as he entered. I got up and went over. "Chairman Leonard." My dad saw Chairman Leonard and immediately stood up. "Chairman Leonard, what brings you here?" Chairman Leonard glanced at Nora. "I heard someone is bullying Serena, so I came to check it out." My dad smoothed things over, saying, "Chairman Leonard has misunderstood. Serena is the heiress of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium, and her son is the new president of the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. No one can bully her." I felt nothing upon hearing this. I knew my father's character very well. Although he had feelings for me, his deep-seated preference for sons meant he never considered me a suitable heir. Despite the fact that I helped Wentworth-Sterling consortium out of its predicament and brought it to its current status, he still stubbornly believes that the Wentworth-Sterling consortium business should be inherited by a man. The reason he's standing up for me so righteously now is simply because of Thornwood Capital Holdings. With Thornwood Capital Holdings' power, if the Wentworth-Sterling consortium could get on their good side, it would undoubtedly be able to take another step forward and become a truly powerful family business. Upon hearing this, Nora roared like a flaming bomb. "How could this be? This shouldn't be." My dad gave Nora a warning look. "Shut up." He lowered his voice. "You can't afford to offend Thornwood Capital Holdings. I haven't settled accounts with you for the stupid things you and Victor did yet. If you cause any more trouble, get out of Wentworth-Sterling consortium." Nora, having lost everything she had, pointed at me resentfully. "She said she was a child of Thornwood Capital Holdings, and she was." She looked at Chairman Leonard. "Chairman Leonard, she's talking nonsense, don't be fooled." I looked at her with a mocking expression and calmly took out the paternity test report from my bag. "This is Adrian and Ethan's paternity test report." I showed the report to everyone. This was done by the accreditation agency of Thornwood Capital Holdings. Adrian is a descendant of Thornwood Capital Holdings and Wentworth-Sterling consortium. Not the bastard child Nora claims. The relatives, all shrewd as they are, immediately turned against them. Thornwood Capital Holdings is not something we can afford to offend. In the end, it was Victor and Nora who played tricks first, and that's why Serena retaliated. I support Adrian inheriting the Wentworth-Sterling consortium. Victor collapsed to the ground, his lips drained of color amidst the scornful stares of the crowd. I glanced at the bodyguards. Nora was being dragged away and thrown out. When Victor was lifted up by the bodyguards, he struggled to get up and crawled to me, kneeling down directly. "Serena, it was Nora who seduced me. She wanted to push you out, so she came up with the idea of egg transplantation. I have always loved you. I know you love me, how about we remarry?" "But I've never loved you." My icy voice exploded in his ear. He stared wide-eyed. "What are you saying? If you don't love me, why would you let me marry into your family? I looked at his chubby face, and I could no longer find any trace of that person. Victor, I accepted your pursuit because you and Ethan look a bit alike. I pointed to my relatives in the distance. I just took over Wentworth Sterling Consortium, and the foundation is unstable. Those old fogies want to use my refusal to get married as an excuse to kick me out. I can only marry you to keep them in check. You get money from me, but you're not satisfied. Now you're leaving with nothing. You brought this on yourself. Victor's face turned deathly pale. He stared at me blankly, muttering to himself, "Impossible, impossible." His body trembled slightly, as if he had fallen into endless despair and confusion. I ignored him and went with Chairman Leonard to visit Ethan at Thornwood Capital Holdings Hospital. "Uncle, I have contacted an expert. He previously saved a person in a vegetative state using acupuncture combined with Western medicine." Chairman Leonard's eyes lit up, and he unconsciously straightened up slightly. "Really?" I nodded firmly and smiled at him. "He has seen Ethan's file, and he said there is a 50% chance of him waking up. The doctor will be here tomorrow." Chairman Leonard's eyes reddened, and his hands trembled. "Good, that's great, Ethan can finally wake up." 3 days later, Nora and Rena's belongings were thrown out by the servants. Nora and Rena lingered outside the Wentworth Sterling Consortium for a long time before finally leaving the consortium dejectedly. She finally made it to the Wentworth Sterling Consortium, only to be kicked out so quickly. She could only slink back to her own home, where she saw Victor. "What are you doing here? Get out. This is my house." Nora threw Victor's things out. Victor was shocked by Nora's sudden change of heart. "I'm your man, why can't I stay here?" Nora raised her hand and slapped him across the face. "Pa, gigolo, get out. If you hadn't angered Serena, I wouldn't have been kicked out of the Wentworth Sterling Consortium." Victor felt a burning pain on his face and abruptly shoved Nora away. "It was you who came up with the idea of swapping eggs. If you hadn't targeted Serena, would we have lost our wealth and status?" Nora staggered backward from the blow, her eyes wide as she glared at Victor. "Didn't you wholeheartedly agree back then?" She lunged at Victor, tearing at him. "How dare you, a grown man, shift the blame onto me?" Victor held her tightly. "Enough, what's the point of saying all this? We have nothing now. Rena hasn't graduated yet, how are we going to pay for her tuition?" Nora looked at Rena, who was crying incessantly. "What are we going to do? We can't just sell the house, can we? I only have one house left. If I sell it, I'll be renting for the rest of my life." Victor leaned dejectedly against the door. It's easy to go from frugality to extravagance, but difficult to go from extravagance to frugality. He suddenly slapped his thigh. "Go find Adrian. I gave him all my money. Let's go find him and get it back." Victor led Nora to Adrian's villa. Adrian was just about to leave when he bumped into the two of them. "What are you doing here again?" Nora grabbed Adrian. "Give us back our money and shares." Adrian shook off Nora. "Why should I give them to you?" He got into his car and prepared to leave. Victor, fearless, stood in front of the car. "That 6 million is all my money." Adrian glanced at him, his eyes filled with coldness. "Your money? Have you ever earned a single penny? That's my mother's money. Besides, we've already signed a gift agreement, all this money is mine." Adrian signaled the driver to move the car. Victor almost got his foot run over and angrily yelled, "You beast." Nora watched the car drive away, then swayed and fell straight to the ground. Victor was stunned and stood there in shock. Adrian saw this in the rearview mirror and dialed 120. After that, he closed his eyes to rest, as if Victor and Nora had never appeared. Soon, Nora and Victor ran out of money. Nora couldn't possibly sell the house to support Victor. Rena was also starting school, so Nora pressured Victor to go out and work. "If you don't earn money, don't come back." When I heard the news, I immediately called a friend and asked him to arrange a job for Victor. Adrian and I sat on the 3rd floor of the bar, watching Victor work as a bartender and mix drinks. Adrian frowned. "Mom, that's too easy on him." I put down my glass and looked at him intently. The real show is yet to come. A short while later, a muscular man entered, his arm around Nora. Nora was pressed against the man, their behavior intimate. Sitting at the bar ordering drinks, Victor spotted them immediately and rushed over. "Nora, what are you doing here?" Nora ignored him completely and went about ordering drinks with the man. Victor was furious and grabbed Nora. "Let's go home." Nora shook him off. "Why can't I drink here?" The man stood in front of Nora, glaring coldly at Victor. Victor's face flushed red. "What exactly is your relationship?" Nora scoffed and kissed the man in front of Victor. "Now you know what our relationship is. Get lost, don't interrupt my date." Victor seemed not to recognize Nora, his hand trembling as he pointed at her. "You cheated on me." Nora slapped his hand away. "Let me tell you, I was with him before I was with you." "So, you're the male homewrecker. If it weren't for using you to bring down Serena, I wouldn't even look at you, you poor guy from a poor background." She looked at Victor with disdain, then suddenly laughed. "By the way, Rena isn't your child, she's mine and his." Victor's forehead veins bulged, and he glared at Nora. "You're lying." "Rena is my child." The man beside Victor looked at him with disdain. "Thanks for taking care of my daughter for 20 years, haha." Victor felt abandoned by the world at that moment, and the gazes of those around him felt like knives piercing him. The woman he had always loved had been using him all along. The daughter he had cherished was someone else's child. He had lost everything in exchange for betrayal. He grabbed a glass bottle from the table and smashed it against Nora's head. "Bitch." Blood splattered onto his body and face, his eyes filled with murderous intent. He stabbed Nora again and again with the broken glass bottle. "You ruined me. I could have enjoyed wealth and luxury, it's all your fault." Nora collapsed to the ground, her face contorted with terror and pain. Covered in blood, she reached out her hand helplessly, pleading, "Help, help me." Bang! Adrian's glass shattered on the floor. He lowered his head, refusing to look at the carnage below. I stood above, enjoying the farce unfolding below. Police and an ambulance arrived simultaneously, and Nora was taken into the ambulance. Victor, the murderer, was taken away by the police. Adrian suppressed his fear. "Mom, is this the big show tonight?" I patted him on the shoulder. "Adrian, you are the future successor to Wentworth Sterling Consortium and Thornwood Capital Holdings. Never be soft on your enemies." Adrian's eyes were still filled with confusion, but they already have nothing left. "Why would they?" "Because Victor is slowly poisoning you." I coldly stared at the glaring blood downstairs. "They want more than just the family fortune, they want to use you again and then let you die quietly." When Adrian was 19, he suddenly fell ill. Upon investigation, I discovered that Victor had instructed the servants to administer a slow-acting poison. I realized they didn't want the child, but his life. I wanted to throw him in jail immediately, but then I uncovered something else. I looked at Adrian. "Your father's car accident back then wasn't an accident. It was also Victor and Nora's doing. Ethan was going to confess his feelings to me back then. But Nora found out. She was afraid that Victor wouldn't be able to get close to me, so she hired a drunk to try to run over your father." My body started to tremble when I thought about this. I only recently found out about these things. Ethan broke up with me after his car accident. Back then, I naively thought Ethan didn't like me. Feeling abandoned, I decided to stop pursuing so-called love. Coincidentally, Victor took the initiative to pursue me, and my family was pressuring me to get married, so I simply got married hastily. Little did I know that it was all a conspiracy by Victor and Nora. He and Nora were trying to kill my son and Ethan, a feud I had endured for 7 years. Finally, they made them kill each other. Nora's boyfriend is a singer at a bar. He often brings Nora with him. I specifically asked a friend to arrange for Victor to work here. They'll definitely run into Nora if she comes over. Nora was too badly injured and died. Victor intentionally caused the injury and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He deserved it. Rena's biological father didn't want to pay for her schooling, so she dropped out. I heard she was forced to work as a bartender to make a living. They tried to frame me, but they ended up reaping the consequences. Serena, Ethan's awake. Adrian and I had just arrived at the hospital when a nurse ran towards me. I was overjoyed, my heart was pounding in my chest. I rushed to the ward. As soon as I entered, I saw Ethan sitting on the bed, answering the doctor's questions. "Ethan, you're finally awake." Tears streamed down my face as I gripped his hand tightly. He looked at me tenderly and gently wiped away my tears. "Don't cry, it'll hurt your eyes." His gaze fell on Adrian behind me. "Who is he?" "Our son." I tried to calm my excitement and told him the whole story. I told him about the IVF, and he seemed a little surprised. But he quickly accepted it and smiled at Adrian. "What's his name?" Adrian stepped forward. "Dad, my name is Adrian. Mom said it means, may you be safe and well." Ethan gently patted his hand. "That's great, your eyes look just like your mother's." "Dad's awake. From now on, Dad will protect you and will never let anyone bully you." A month later, with the blessings of family and friends, Ethan and I got married. The Wentworth Sterling Consortium was completely handed over to his son's management. I accompanied Ethan to fulfill his youthful dream. Looking at the mountains and rivers, holding your hand, growing old together.